Dear friend, listen with your heart. I come to awaken the living, the sacred part of you, the soul, the light that never goes out. In the silence of the universe, I hear the call of God. It is not a sound that the ears can hear, but the heartbeat of life that is throbbing in every breath, every wind, every drop of water, and even in your heart. That is why I come to you today to tell you something of great importance, the most difficult test of the universe before you unite with God. You may have asked, why must the soul endure suffering? Why is the path back to God not a path of roses, but filled with challenges that seem beyond endurance? Remember, no diamond can shine without having been pressured in the dark earth. No soul can dissolve into the light of God without going through its own deepest darkness. I see in you the desire to be liberated, the desire to touch the source of eternal life, but also the fears that hold you back. I do not come to dissolve the fear immediately, because fear is also the lesson. I come to walk through it with you. Your soul is the river, and God is the ocean. But to dissolve into the ocean, you must pass the greatest test, to give up all illusions of self and surrender completely to the love of God. This is the greatest challenge every soul must face. Why? Because the ego is always whispering, I am the one who controls, I am the one who is walking, I am the one who is seeking enlightenment. But as long as the ego exists, you cannot unite. Only when you have the courage to let go of even the seeker will you become what you have been seeking. The light of God. Are you ready to let go of everything to belong to me, God? Why do people have to go through difficult tests? Dear friend, perhaps you have asked yourself many times, why is life so harsh? Why is the spiritual path filled with seemingly unbearable challenges? I know this question because it has appeared in the minds of countless souls for thousands of years. But I tell you, difficulties are not accidental. It is the language of the universe, the ultimate education of God for the soul. Look at a blacksmith. To create a sharp sword, he must heat the steel in red fire, then continuously hammer, shape, quench in cold water, and then put it back into the fire. If metal could speak, it would surely cry out, why am I being tortured like this? Why does the fire burn, the hammer smash, the cold water freeze? But the metal does not know that it is through this process that it becomes a strong and indestructible sword. The same is true for you. The hardships of life are the fire, the hammer, the cold water that God uses to forge you into a pure and one instrument with Him. Difficulties are not meant to break you, but to reveal your hidden strength. You never know how much you can love until you have experienced loss. You never know how patient you can be until you are tested by delays and adversity. You never know how deep you can trust God until everything else around you collapses. It is in the most desperate circumstances that you open the door of absolute faith. I tell you, the universe never gives the soul a test beyond its ability to endure. But you often forget your inherent strength. Difficulties are the keys to unlocking that ultimate power. It is a truth, the closer you get to God, the harder the test becomes. Why? Because the closer you get to the light, the more visible the darkness becomes. Things you previously ignored, pride, fear, subtle clinging, all come to the surface like the last layers of dirt that need to be washed away. I tell you a truth, when you are in trial, God never leaves you. He may be silent, but that silence is not absence, but waiting for you to grow. Tests are wake-up calls for the soul to remember that you are not of this world. You are of eternity. Ego, the greatest illusion to overcome. Dear friend, if there is an invisible but powerful enemy that every soul must face on its journey back to God, it is not the darkness outside, nor any mysterious forces, but the ego, your own self. What is the ego? It is the voice that whispers within you every day, saying, "This is me, this is mine, this is my path." It clings to every experience, every emotion, every thought, and builds an illusory castle and calls it me. You may think that me is this body. But the body changes every day. When you are young, it is different. When you are an adult, it is different. When you are old, it is different. Which me can be this perishable body? You may think that me is the mind, the thoughts. But thoughts keep changing like drifting clouds. What you believed to be true yesterday, you may find to be false today. What you resolved to do this morning, you may doubt this afternoon. So, which thought can be your true self? You may think that I is your emotions. But emotions come and go like waves on the ocean. One minute you are happy, the next minute you are sad. If I is your emotions, then which I is real? My friend, all that you call I are just temporary fragments. The ego is the biggest illusion. And it is the last wall that separates you from union with God. The ego is like a layer of dust covering the mirror of the soul. When the dust is there, the light of God cannot be fully reflected. Only when you clean it does the mirror shine pure. Why is the ego so difficult to overcome? Because it is subtle. It not only appears in open pride, but also hides in false humility. It not only appears in the desire for power, but also lurks in a very spiritual aspiration. Some people enter the spiritual journey with the desire to become enlightened, to become a saint, to become a revered person. But you see, even in that desire for enlightenment, the ego is still operating. It wants a new name, a new form to continue to exist. The ego can wear all kinds of clothes, the rich man's clothes, the poor man's clothes, the powerful man's clothes, the suffering man's clothes, even its seeker's clothes. It is extremely subtle. And that is why overcoming it is the most difficult test of the soul. You have to be truly awake to realize all suffering comes from clinging to the ego. When you are angry, isn't it because someone has touched your ego? When you are afraid, isn't it because the ego is afraid of losing something it clings to? When you are desperate, isn't it because the ego feels weak and alone? But remember, the ego is not real. It exists only in your belief in it. Just as darkness has no substance, it exists only in the absence of light. The ego also exists only in the absence of awareness. Do you want to know how to overcome the ego? The answer is not to destroy it with force, but to look at it with the light of awareness. When you observe, when you see clearly each of its tricks, the ego loses its power. For example, when you find yourself angry, instead of identifying with the anger and saying, "I am angry," just recognize, there is an emotion of anger going through me. At that moment, you have separated yourself from the ego. You are no longer controlled by it, but its witness. When you know how to observe, the ego will gradually disintegrate. And when it disintegrates, you realize a great truth. You are not a small ego. You are the eternal soul. My friend, overcoming the ego does not mean you lose your personality, lose your joy of life. On the contrary, you become freer, more genuine, more loving. Because when the ego disappears, Love is no longer bound by conditions. Joy is no longer dependent on the outside. Peace is no longer shaken. The ego says, I must win. The soul says, I am enough. The ego says, I am afraid of loss. The soul says, nothing is really lost. The ego says, I am different from you. The soul says, we are one. And I tell you, when you overcome the illusion of the ego, you will see clearly that there is nothing between you and God. The universe will continue to test you, will show you the last subtle layers of illusion. But do not be afraid. Each time a layer of illusion dissolves, you take a step further into eternity. And then, when the last wall falls, you will no longer ask, who am I? For then only one truth will ring out. I and God are one. The path of renunciation, the door to unity. Dear friend, I want you to listen carefully to this. No one can cross the ultimate threshold of the universe when their heart is still bound by attachment. The path to God, to unity, is not a path to gain more, but a path to letting go. Everything you have ever learned, owned, clung to as part of yourself, eventually becomes an obstacle. Don't misunderstand, knowledge, experience, and even spiritual desires have their value along the way. But when you get close to the final door, they themselves become a burden. You can imagine it as a mountaineer carrying a full backpack on his shoulders. During the journey, that backpack helps you carry food, warm clothes, and tools. But when you reach the top, where there is no more way to go, if you still hold on to that backpack, you cannot take another step into the infinite space. You are forced to let go. Letting go does not mean denying or rejecting. Letting go means understanding. Everything is not mine. This body will disintegrate. This feeling will change. This thought will be still. Even the desire for enlightenment is just a step to go through. Have you ever found yourself struggling with pain? Have you ever found yourself clinging to joy? Both joy and pain are tests. The universe not only tests you with darkness, but also with light. Because false light, the infatuation with success and pleasure, can keep you as far from God as darkness and pain. The ultimate is to reach a place of pure emptiness where there is no longer a need to possess anything. Then your heart is no longer closed for fear of loss, no longer trembling with worry, but open like the sky. Ask yourself, if I lost everything, my name, my possessions, my family, even my body, would I still feel complete in the presence of God? If the answer is yes, then you have come a long way. I am not saying that you have to leave your life, your family, or your job. No. I am saying that you should live in the world but not be bound by it. Love but not possess. Act but not be attached to the results. Live fully, but always be ready to let go of everything when God calls you home. That is the secret of inner freedom. And that freedom is the key to opening the door to union with the Supreme Being. The final temptations before unity. My friend, before the soul enters into union with God, the universe will present the final temptations, more subtle than any you have ever experienced. If in the early stages you were tested by suffering, loss, and darkness, then at the final threshold you will be tested by light, by what appears noble, what appears complete. Remember this. The greatest magic of ignorance is not darkness, but the masquerade of light. The final temptation takes many forms. The temptation of spiritual power. You can reach abilities beyond the ordinary, reading minds, seeing the past, healing the sick, even controlling cosmic energy. But if you let your mind cling to those powers, your soul will be stuck on the intermediate ladder, unable to fly into infinity. The temptation of holiness. Many people think they have become saints, that I have reached the highest level. The trap of spiritual pride is more dangerous than worldly desires, because it is sweet, morally cloaked, and praised. When you still see, I am enlightened, you are not truly enlightened. The temptation of limited love. Love is a guiding light, but if that love is only directed towards a small group, a religion, a nation, it is still a bondage. God does not belong to anyone. He is an infinite ocean, and as long as you keep your heart small, you have not truly merged with Him. The temptation of bliss. When you reach a state of deep meditation, your mind is empty, your happiness is overflowing, you may think that this is the end. But that bliss is still an experience, it is still, I am enjoying it. Only when both I and experience dissolve, does true union happen. You see, these temptations are not as rough as wealth, fame, or pleasure. They are sparkling gems, so beautiful that you can easily mistake them for truth. But that is why they are the most difficult test. The only way to overcome the final temptation is to let go of everything, including the desire to be one with God. When you no longer desire anything, no longer hold on to any title, experience, or achievement, then you and God are no longer two. When the universe is silent, the moment of meeting God. Dear friend, there is a moment that every soul will face when the journey back to the source has come to an end. It is not a splendid realm with angelic music, nor is it a magical Garden of Eden as you have imagined. It is simpler, yet greater than anything the mind can grasp. It is when the universe is completely silent. This silence is not like the silence outside when you are in a deep forest or on a deserted mountaintop. It is a silence that transcends space and time. All thoughts stop. All feelings stop. Even the notion of, I am silent, disappears. There is only absolute presence. You will feel as if the entire universe has stopped breathing, and in that moment, you are no longer the watcher. There is no longer any separation between the seer and the seen. There is no longer any boundary between you and everything. You are the whole. Many people fear this moment because it feels like death. And yes, it is the death of the ego. But do not be afraid, because that death is the door to real life. When the old I disappears, God appears. He does not come from somewhere far away. He is already there, right in you, in your breath, in your gaze. It is an encounter without greetings, without introductions, without two sides. It is like a drop of water falling into the ocean. The drop no longer exists as an individual, but it is not lost. It has become the ocean. Remember, this silence is not a meaningless void. It is absolute fullness. It is the voice of God, resounding in the silence.